In 2025 alone, billionaire philanthropist Mackenzie Scott has donated more than $740 million to historically black colleges and universities, as I mentioned earlier. For HBCUs that have not received gifts, though, the question is, when is our turn? Now, as I've mentioned on the show before, we have no idea because those donations, they kind of come out of the blue. But many are also asking, how does she even decide? So, to answer that question, I decided to ask someone who has an idea of how these things kind of work. And she thinks like a philanthropist, actually. Her name is Kimberly O'Neill, good friend of mine. She's a social justice and economic mobility advocate for Black communities. She's the founder and CEO of Giving Blueprint, which is a company that increases engagement through neighborhood revitalization, development of strategic partnerships, advocacy, community empowerment, and civic education. And she's the former appointee, by the way, of the city of Plano mayor and the council to the Community Relations Commission in Texas, which she chaired and made recommendations on how to distribute millions in funding to nonprofit organizations. Kimberly is an alumna of North Carolina A&T University, or I should say State University, and she's currently pursuing her professional doctorate in philanthropic leadership from the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. What's up, my good sister? How are you?
Hey friend, I'm doing well. Excited to talk to you today. This is my happy place talking about how we give well and celebrating those that are giving without putting their spin or enforcing their spin on things as a condition for giving. So and that's so big, especially in the current climate that's an important part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, we're going to get to that question too. For those who don't know, though, let's take an overall look at philanthropy. As someone who has been in this space, especially on the distribution side of things, and who understands how philanthropists think, what are some of the reasons that you have seen philanthropists donate major gifts, by the way, major gifts to institutions, causes, and nonprofit organizations? What have you seen?
I think it starts with alignment, right? Everyone, when it comes to philanthropy, and I just want to preface by saying this: I think everybody has a right to give the way that they want, right? When it's their own personal gifts, talents, treasures, and things of that nature. But when we see these massive gifts, and we may not understand how those massive gifts happen, I think the first thing is alignment. What are the giving priorities that that particular philanthropist or that group of philanthropists or a foundation, what are the things that they center as important? And how, when they're making that gift, whether it's a gift that they give simply because, or because someone has requested it through application or some other process, it comes down to alignment and priorities. And the interesting thing, Eddie, that I try to also add to that part of the conversation is it's alignment for the philanthropist for sure, but it should also be alignment for the recipient. And if that gift and the values of the donor align with the organization or the institution as well.
So when you talk about alignment, this is an example where some foundation, for example, that's just giving out millions and millions of dollars, and people are going, "Okay, I want those millions of dollars," and you say to them, "Well, you are a social services nonprofit. They like to target education K through 12." And so in those cases, it's not a fit. There's no alignment there. Is that what you're saying?
There is no alignment, and I think it's important that I know this year specifically has been tough in when it comes to philanthropy and gifts and things like that for the receiving institution or organization, but ensuring that you're applying because there is alignment is important, not just because you want to make sure that you're not wasting time, right? I don't want to apply for something I'm absolutely not going to give, but I think people have to remember your reputation also carries. right?
Mm,
We often think of philanthropists or these large scale institutions as, everybody's always going to be and work in that silo. And it's important to also remember that there are people that are hired that look for opportunities outside of that institution. It means that whatever you've done, right, wrong, or indifferent, may also follow you to another institution, another funding opportunity. And so you just want to be mindful of what are the constraints around particular giving opportunities, and are you in alignment? And I'm not saying this to say that some of these constraints are right. That's a whole
mhm.
nother conversation. But I do think that it is important to align and utilize your time wisely and pick and choose those opportunities that are great fits for your organizations or institutions.
Mm. So, Scott is doing something that is a bit unusual for people, and and I think on some level it really frustrates a lot of HBCUs in particular. But when you look at her giving with HBCUs, the nonprofit organizations that she's given to, none of these organizations seem to know that the gift is coming. It's a surprise, and so why do you think she keeps surprising people with these gifts?
I think there are a few things. One is when it comes to her values, one of the things that she has, I don't know if everyone is aware, she writes essays occasionally on for her website, and sometimes she posts them, I think, on Medium as well. And she talks about why she gives the way that she gives. And one of the things that she says is the people that are closest to community, closest to the issues, that are able to make the best decisions on how money and the vision should be executed. So when she gives unrestricted gifts. And anyone that knows anything about the donor world in terms of being an organization that's receiving, to have an unrestricted gift is beautiful. It means you can
Mm-hmm.
do anything you want with that funding, right? Restricted gifts are also great, but restricted gifts means that how whatever the conditions were for giving the money, it's the only way that you can use that money, right,
Right.
without asking for permission to deviate away from that. So she gives, number one, because it's in alignment with her values, the way that she gives. But number two, I think it also has to do with visibility, and how HBCUs are. In the beginning, I know I was hearing it's always the private institutions, it's always the same institutions that get funding, but we are seeing that that is not the case, that
Mm-hmm.
she really is spreading around small institutions, large institutions, public institutions, private institutions. And one of the things I think I am also noting is how are the messages of the institutions being carried outside of the institution?
Yeah.
Alumni, benefactors, who media coverage, your PR, like how are people supposed to know about you? How are you sharing your achievements from the institutions, whether they be big or small? Right? Because again, she's not just going after and supporting the large institutions. And we're also now seeing that institutions are getting funding 2 and 3 times from her. So there is something about managing the capital, being in alignment with her values and how she gives. And I'm also going to say, I would love to be on. I know there's a secret team, Eddie. I know there is a secret team of people that are making these recommendations to put them on her radar. And I'm sure that there's vetting that's happening with her team as well. I would love to be one of those people on that team, because to be able to make recommendations, and I have made recommendations like that to private foundations, to be able to make those kind of recommendations, to be able to help people to understand there are also smaller organizations doing equally as great work. You may not know them, they may not be on your radar, but if given an opportunity, I would love to be able to share those things with you. I know there are people doing that for Mackenzie Scott as well. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. So it goes down to, how is your message being carried?
You're listening to The Way Forward. I'm Eddie Francis, and we're speaking to Kimberly O'Neill, who is a philanthropy expert. And we are talking about the mind of the philanthropist. And we're drilling down a little bit more with Mackenzie Scott and the gifts that she's done to HBCUs. As you were speaking, I actually literally recently had a conversation. I'm talking only a few days ago with an HBCU president. And he asked that question. He was like, well, when is it going to be our turn? Because we've never gotten anything. And so one of the things I said was, listen, your communications person has got to get on it and has got to tell your story. But here's what that means. You know, you don't have to go out in the media and be visible. Put those stories need to be on your website, because my sense, Kim, is that her team, they're combing websites and people don't know it. And they're looking for updated stories. They're looking to figure out, how the students are participating in academics outside of the institution. They're looking for superlatives. They're looking for, professors and the work that they're doing, whether it's research or whether it's activities that they're doing at conferences or whatever that they're doing. I just get the sense that they're doing that sort of thing. And that's what I tried to help him out with. And I said, you've got to tell the story. And trust me, search engine optimization is a real thing. They do a search on your university, you want some results to come up. And so what would you say? What would you say as far as tracking in that direction, as far as controlling your own story?
And I think I think you just said it, controlling your own story. What is the narrative about your institution that you are putting out? And also, Eddie, I think it's important. What's the narrative that you're putting out about your institution that other people can repeat over and over again on your
Mhm.
behalf, right? Especially your alum and, your students, because when we're talking about the digital divide between generations, our younger students can get a message out quicker than anybody else.
Yeah.
And what we do want is for those messages to also be positive, and impactful. And let me just put a comma. And even if a narrative is not the best narrative, as long as it's not part of like scandal or something like that, because sometimes the message might not be as positive because there is a need.
Yeah.
And it could be an organic conversation that your students, your current students, I should say, are having. And it drops on the radar for philanthropists to understand there is a need. There's a need from an academic perspective. There may be a need from an infrastructure perspective. There may be a need because of growth. Um, and just opportunity in general. And so it is about sharing your stories, but it's also about controlling how it is shared, and then how it's replicated. If it's too hard for me to explain, how can I share it with anyone? As you said, I am an alum of the illustrious North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I was laughing thinking about this particular interview coming up, because I think it was 2 days ago I got my Thanksgiving card from the school, and there was a QR code on the inside, and I giggled. I was like, "Ooh, modern!" And then you click on it, and then you click on it, and it's a less than 1 minute links to a 1 minute, less than 1 minute video with current students talking about the benefits of alumni giving and thanking
Wow.
us for how we give. And it is a reminder of touching point everywhere you go. Because now I'm going to talk about it because it was simple, it was easy, it was a card and a QR code, and it was less than a minute for me to understand. And the first young man that was shown, I was like, oh, he's a political science major. I was a poli-sci major. So all of these instant connections that make it easier for us to tell stories and celebrate, the goodness of what's happening at our institutions.
You know what's funny about that? I actually just did. I have this podcast called EthoCast, and I actually just did an episode about philanthropy, philanthropic investment, fraternities and sororities. And one of the things that I said was, as far as action steps, were communicate, collaborate, moderate. And on the moderate part, I said, hey, if you really want to make those philanthropic investments much better, make it easy for people. Make it as easy as possible for people to give to whatever cause you're trying to invest in or trying to help out. So it's interesting that you bring that up. The other thing I thought about is you mentioned this, and I don't want this to be a buried treasure in the interview, but you mentioned that Mackenzie Scott does blog. Read the blogs.
Read the blog. It's I think it's Yield Giving. I think it's
Hmm.
yieldgiving.com. And then also she has her Medium page, but I pay attention to Yield Giving, but I do think she posts the same thing in both spaces. But if you want to tap into the mind of what Mackenzie Scott is thinking about, that should be required reading. It should
Hmm.
be required, and not just because of positioning for potential visibility to Mackenzie Scott, but how many other Mackenzie Scotts are out there that may not be able to give at a Mackenzie Scott level, but are willing to give. They just need to know more information, just make it easier for them. And I will say this too, a lot of people, I had posted this on Facebook, I think last week, just a year ago, about a year and a half ago now, the first article of criticism that I saw on her giving, and it said, and this was from the bill, and I'll leave out the name, but people can Google if they want to. But she was criticized for how she gives unrestricted gifts by other billionaires, and it was said that she was ruining philanthropy.
I saw that actually. I did see that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the first article came out in like May of 2024, and then there was a subsequent article that came out towards the latter end of 2024. I think it was Q4 that one came out, but it was from the wealthy community criticizing how she's giving. And so I giggle every time she gives, because I'm like, she's just like, yeah, I heard you, and I'm still gonna
Yeah.
do it, right? I see how you want to give, but I'm still gonna do it my way, and I'm
Hmm.
committed to giving away my wealth while I'm alive.
Yeah.
And I think that people have to really pay attention to that, and then also not just position for Mackenzie Scott. If Mackenzie Scott is the driver for you to say, I need to be on that radar, just be on the radar for any and everyone. Because if you position for her, you're positioning for anyone. And I think that's the important part, not just positioning for a one or two time giving, even though these are wonderful. So I'm not even minimizing that. But I think it's also about just positioning.
Hmm.
It's just positioning for the greater good. It's positioning for your existing alumni. It's positioning for your future alumni who are paying attention. It's positioning for those partners in the community, people that may have wanted to go to HBCUs, didn't know anything really about HBCUs, but understand the importance of HBCUs and their success and survival in this country. And so I think there are a number of different reasons why people should be thinking about not just Mackenzie Scott, position for her, but position for everyone. So that you can reap the benefits and the support of people along the way, because those are the additional people, are the people that carry your message that can make it easier to get on the radar of a Mackenzie Scott or equivalent.
Mm. You're listening to The Way Forward. I'm Eddie Francis, and joining me is Kimberly O'Neill. We're talking about the mind of a philanthropist. So I got a question here. It's a big one, and I have one more after that. But here's the big question. You mentioned earlier that you may have an institution that's going through whatever issues it's going through. And when you and I talked about this last week, this is what really got my wheels turning to invite you to the show. One of the things you made the distinction between was someone who is donating to save a place and someone who is investing. And you were saying people aren't necessarily going to donate to save you. What is the difference between an institution that needs to be saved and an institution that is positioned for investment?
Can you manage the capital?
Hmm.
So if I'm going to give you the gift, and if I already know that there are some financial challenges or otherwise, and that I know my gift is going to get you out of that, and I'm aware of that, I don't mind giving that. But most people are not giving to help you to stay afloat. They're looking for the opportunity to help you soar and get to the next level.
So
And
so
so
so for so for so for clarity, if an institution needs $5 million to stay open, and somebody gives $7 million, and that $5 million is gone in a month, That's probably not the investment they were looking for.
At all. And it's not just the multimillionaire billionaire investors or donors either. It's can be anyone because
Oh, alumni
everyone,
especially say something about this kind of thing.
yeah, because my donation level, right? I'm thinking about the same thing. Unless I know there's an active campaign to save something, I am giving because I'm thinking you can manage the capital and move on. And so I think there is a difference between being honest and upfront about a need that says right now our primary concern is to keep our doors open. Our primary concern is to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why we have a particular campaign going. Versus receiving a significant investment when there is an assumption that there are things going well in the institution, only to find out that that donation is really going to take care of debt, but won't go towards any type of elevation or other opportunities for the institution. And I think that that is equally as important when we're talking about responsibility. I talk about that a lot with nonprofit organizations when we're having the same kind of conversations about people won't give. People, I'm like, but your 990 is telling me something different.
Mm-hmm.
Your 990 is telling me that you're always in the red. And there's not a justifiable explanation. I had a one-time grant, we hit the pandemic, or we just had a one-time issue, but this is, I'm looking every year that this is the same issue. It means that someone who's monitoring your finances. Do you have the right people in place? Are you not making the right budget adjustments that you should? And so when you're not able to communicate that, it is a warning to potential donors. And so you have to be mindful, especially for public public institutions where financial information is made public. It's a lot different with private institutions, and I think that's something that when we're talking about how do organizations and institutions get on someone's radar, what is out there about you that you don't realize that people have access to?
Mm-hmm.
And how, and I tell this to a lot of my clients, you never want your finances to tell a story without you being in a room. If there
Mm.
is an explanation that needs to be shared about why your financial situation doesn't look good, because you can have all kinds of people creating all kinds of narratives on your behalf, whether it be right or wrong. And so be aware of what kind of information is available about you that tells a story before anyone from your team can counter that narrative. That is something that I think goes underestimated when we're talking about philanthropy and who doesn't give and why people don't give. What information is available about you that is telling a story that counters everything that you're presenting in the narrative you're choosing to share?
Yeah, and this is also, I think, a message, especially to the HBCUs that have not received gifts or to nonprofit organizations that are looking for this opportunity. This is also a message, I think, for them. You better get to working together and collaborating internally to get it together. I mean, y'all can't have a bunch of lone wolves who are off doing their own thing. People have got to get in the same room and they've got to work together, to really, really attract this kind of investment, I'm thinking.
And I think so. I think, and goes for many organizations. This is not HBCU specific,
Right.
right? That we do have people working in silos. So marketing, not talking to development and advancement, right? Not talking to the administration. And then not paying attention to what the alumni associations are saying, right? Everybody's carrying something different. And it's doesn't matter if it's the HBCU, other college, other types of higher ed institutions, or nonprofits in general. What are you all collectively? When I was coming up in government and when I started in nonprofits, there was a golden rule: we fix what needs to happen in the house before we go outside, right? And sometimes I feel like in this philanthropic world that there are a lot of different conversations happening outside the house that should have happened inside the house, so it
Yeah.
comes across like a united front. Because I think it should be understood that every institution has some sort of a challenge, but
Hmm.
how we choose to address those challenges are it's extremely critical. And then something else you just said about, just collaborations, also look at how she's giving, the gift to the to UNCF, and that long-term strategy that will benefit several institutions. um you know there could be that she is like, it's not as if she's gonna, well, she could, let me not say this, because she could say, where are all the list of all the HBCUs, let me go on and give everybody a gift today, right? Versus really trying to understand and pay attention to her strategy and how she does these one-time gifts, how they're even evaluating how the funding is being used. It's unrestricted, so you can do what you want, but again, that how are you managing the capital? Are you responsible with the capital? What did we see as a result of the capital, and does it warrant a second gift? And as we've seen, there are instances where a second gift, small and large institutions, those institutions have warranted second gifts. And I think that's extremely important. And I think for HBCUs that may not have received yet, let's say yet,
Hmm.
that I would say just keep the door open, because your time could be coming. But in the meantime, what does it look like, again, as I said earlier, to prepare for a Mackenzie Scott gift from anyone, not
Hmm.
just her? Because you could do well based on strategy and campaigns for others that do have the ability to give, maybe not at her level, but they do have the ability to give. How are you communicating your story and the narrative that you want to be told about your institutions?
Yeah. Houston Tillotson got a gift from a foundation in Texas, 150 million. And so nothing to do with Mackenzie Scott.
Nothing to do.
So, last question here, and this is the big question because I always like to leave the listeners with a way forward. And so, for those who are alumni, they are friends of, including the employees of HBCUs, what can they do? You talked about there being an intention when it comes to telling positive stories. What other types of things can people do to draw attention to the HBCU that's their favorite, their employer, their alma mater? What can folks do?
I'm going to say the first thing is post the link to give. It doesn't matter what people can give. It is important that HBCUs have the numbers, those individual donors. It doesn't matter. Every institution might have their own starting point, but give no matter what you can give to any institution you love. Any institution that you love, the band, you love their engineering program, you love their medical program, whatever the case may be, give something, because it sets the tone for their metrics as it relates to advancement. Number two, if you are an alum, anytime you see something, I saw during homecoming season, it was brilliant to me, because we're in this social media world, that A&T ran a campaign, and they gave you a little graphic that you can post on social media. That was a
Mm.
no-brainer. You got the link to that after you made the donation. Share the stories. Continue, if you are alum and you can volunteer at college fairs where you can tell the stories of to families who may in future alum of HBCUs, that you can talk to them about what it's like, what's different about HBCU life. I think it's important that we continue to share, and beyond homecoming season, right? It has to. People say that us Aggies are arrogant about our love. Absolutely true. We are arrogant about our love for A&T, but I think that's true for all HBCUs, right? And it's
Yeah.
something that we can never let go. And I think it's also part of the narrative that gets to be shared out with the public. So donate, share any links that you can, give often, give what you can, be strategic about it. But even if you're in a season where you can say, I can only give $10, give the $10.
Hmm.
because it is important for all HBCUs, and get active in whatever ways you can with your alumni association. Share information that you see on social media. Talk about the campaigns. It is important as we see so many. I'm a graduate of North Carolina A&T, but I have HBCU pride.
Yeah.
And I think it is important because when we see one go down, it opens the door for us to lose more. And
Yes.
so it is important that we just continue. There's competition, of course, but at the end of the day, I know the survival of all HBCUs is important to all HBCUs. And so those are the more immediate things that I want to share. And if there's an opportunity too for those that may work in corporate America where there are matching gifts opportunities, don't forget your HBCU or an HBCU that you love. Get them involved, and make sure you can get matching gifts to the foundations for your institutions as well.
Kimberly O'Neill. She is a social justice and economic mobility advocate for Black communities. Thank you so much for joining me on the way forward.
Thank you, Eddie.